All right, good afternoon. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee meeting. Today is April 22nd, 2015. I'm Councilmember Blong Yang, chair of this committee. With me today are Council Council President Barb Johnson, Council Members Warsami and Gordon, and Councilmember Palmisano. Councilmember Reich will not be joining us today. He has, I believe, city business to attend to. We have 5 items on our consent agenda. We have 3 items on our discussion agenda, and we have 2 items that are kind of just public notices. I'm going to take care of those 2 items that are items number 9 and 10, which are just public notices really quickly, and then we'll take care of the consent agenda, and then we'll go right to the discussions. So the first 2 items are items number 10 or 9 and 10, and basically on May 6th, we will have the public hearings for the repeal of the lurking ordinance and the repeal of the spitting, depositing tobacco ordinances. And on May 6th, we will be receiving public testimony for both of those ordinances. And then on May 20th, on May 6th, we'll take public testimony. We will continue that to May 20th, where we will receive staff presentations and also public testimony then. And so, these 2 ordinance repeals will go through 2 cycles before they get voted upon by the full council. Council members, any questions on that? Okay, so that's just general notice. I'm just going to read those 2. Now for the 5 consent items. The first item is to authorize a contract with the Downtown Improvement District to receive funds, the amount of $28,730 for police officer support of the Downtown Summer Community Engagement Program, and authorizing proper city officers to sign the contract agreement, approving resolution increasing police appropriation, and this matter will be referred to Ways and Means. Second item is to authorize 3 MOUs in the amount of $20,000 each with the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office and Metro Transit and the Minnesota State Patrol for the 2015 Safety Initiative to help defray costs for jet patrols, and authorizing any documents necessary to effectuate the agreement. And that will again be referred to Ways and Means, and we might be talking about that a little bit later in discussion as well. The third item is to authorize a contract with Jada Toys Inc., permitting them to produce and market die-cast replicas of MPD patrol vehicles, complete with department trademark logos for tentatively entitled Hero Patrol die-cast product line for a period of 2 years. That sounds really cool, actually. That's going to be referred to Ways and Means. Item number 4 is to authorize a contract with the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine in the amount of $1,035 for canine veterinary care for new dogs for the period April 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2015, again referred to Ways and Means. And the 5th item is to authorize a contract with the University of Minnesota in the amount of $11,122 to provide bomb units and K9 unit security at concert to be staged at the TCF Bank Stadium, in approving resolution increasing police appropriation, and this again would be referred to Ways and Means. And I just want to share that one of those concerts is going to be a Rolling Stones concert, I believe. So council members, any questions, any remarks with regards to the first 5 consent items? Right, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, all those carry. Right, so we have 3 items on discussion today, and I think I'm going to switch it up because I understand that the chief is going to be here just for a short little time period. So, I jokingly say, sometimes people say that they're going to show up for a short little time period, and then if the discussion goes south, they stay here for the whole thing. But hopefully, it won't go south. Okay, so we are going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to start with the summer strategy for law enforcement first. And then we will go to the Office of Justice Programs next, and then we will do the jail fees contract last. And that's because for the jail fees contract, we have Assistant City Attorney Bert Osborne and Robin McPherson here, and they're going to be here for the whole meeting. So we're going to put you guys last. I think it's the best stuff for last. So, we'll start with the first things, which are the summer strategy for law enforcement. And Chief Arto, you're up.
Good afternoon. That's very true. You could be here for a real long time. We could talk about this for many hours. I'd be happy to. But I do have a chat with the chief session. I do not only community members, but I do it internally. So at 2 o'clock, I have a chat with the chief session that I should be at. So summer comes every year, and we're always strategizing and planning on what we should be doing to beef up patrols and such in the summer. A couple of things I want to highlight. This will be, very high-level overview because we will be having further conversations, press conferences, and opportunities to discuss more in depth what we're doing in different precincts. But I want to start with our focuses and emphasis this summer will be on crime reduction strategies versus just enforcement numbers. It's about quality over quantity, and we're holding inspectors accountable to crime reduction. And what does that look like? This next is emphasizing tracking positive community contacts. So at the beginning of my tenure, we talked about having cops out of cars and more opportunities to have officers connect with community members outside of a crisis. And one of the things that we started doing then is the first year it was providing those opportunities. Last year we began tracking those along with our Code 4 numbers. So we not only track arrests and proactive enforcement activities, we track proactive positive community contacts. So that's something that we're able to gauge now this year versus last year. So that's something new for us. And then curfew, Home First program, which is an emphasis citywide that we want to see if there's a parent at home, we want to take kids home first before we take them downtown. So as far as enforcement strategies, I'm pleased to say we have 45 more officers on the street this year than we did in 2014. We have more CSOs and cadets as well. Jet Patrol, as you just approved, will be working Northside Community starting June 1st. That includes Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, Minnesota State Patrol, Metro Transit, and those are in the evening hours. We will also be starting a Minneapolis gang unit. We've discussed that briefly offline. This will be a street intel patrol team with 5 officers and 1 sergeant. They will be focusing on our most violent offenders. And when we have a shooting that occurs, their emphasis will be trying to prevent a retaliation shooting and paying attention to what's going on more in a timely fashion. We have our Safe Streets Task Force, we have our weapons unit, and they focus more on long term. This is more about street ready at the time. Full-time bike cops for kids, that's new. You're all familiar with Officer Mike Kirchen and what he does. We're going to do that full-time in the summer, and he's going to rotate a week in each of the precincts. And he's going to team up with the beat officers that are working in the precincts. This helps us not only engage in the community, but we're connecting with some of these kids, sharing information. We could be getting information as far as who's committing crimes, but also connecting our officers with kids in situations where they weren't normally know officers. And we know we can, when our young people have a first name to an officer, they're more likely to come forward with information. And it's a great recruiting tool, frankly, for us as well. We'll have a full-time bike team, which they will be proactively coordinating with other officers on bikes and community engagement, really directing them on where they could go citywide. Our school resource officers will be assigned to the precincts because schools obviously won't be in session. So out of the 16 SROs we have and 1 sergeant, 2 will be behind for our juvenile diversion initiative, and 2 of the SROs will stay back for summer school. But the 12 SROs will be staying connected and out with kids during the daytime hours. Their focus will be out connecting versus 911 calls. Obviously, if there is a need and there's a priority call, they will handle that, but they will be more proactive in the community. And then successful last year was our MPD Police Reserve serving as ambassadors, extra eyes and ears downtown. So those are our volunteer folks that generally will help us more when we have a 35W bridge collapse, a traffic situation, block parties, Aquatennial, but we're using them more proactively in just, they're like extension of DID ambassadors. So that is the big picture of what we're doing generally citywide, but obviously throughout the city. Inspectors know that they have full support. We have to constantly be reevaluating what's going on based on whatever the issues are, the trends are, refocus resources, or what the needs are. And so that's constant evaluation, but that's the big picture of things that are addition to. I'll just add one more thing. Last year, because I get questions on this, we trained, including myself, the command staff on fair and impartial policing training, the implicit bias training. Our officers will begin their training in May, and I anticipate the entire department being done by the end of 2015. So all officers at all levels of the organization. So that's the high-level summer strategy for 2015. And I'll answer any questions.
Council members, any questions? Oh, Councilmember Gordon.
And I had a comment and I guess a question. Thanks so much for being here.
Sure.
And I appreciate hearing about this. I guess I have maybe two questions. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about this Home First program, and maybe specifically, what that means. It sounds like it means you at least drive the child to the home and actually knock on the door before they come downtown with every curfew, the case that we pick up, but maybe you could just clarify that.
Council President Yang and Councilmember Gordon, that's exactly what we're doing. We're encouraging officers to seek out an adult that is available at the home. We're trying to ensure the safety of kids and that they're home, but decriminalizing, shall we say, curfew. The goal is to keep kids home and safe, but there may be reasons why they're not home. But the first thing we want to do is bring them home. And so we just call it Home First.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think there could be some positives with that, especially if home is a safe place that we're taking them back to. Then I had a little question about the police reserves and the volunteers downtown. Are these, who becomes a police reserve and what kind of training do they have? And you mentioned it's an extension of the downtown ambassadors, so I assume they're not equipped with the same kind of equipment that a police officer would be equipped with or have the same kind of authority?
Yep, Chair Yang and Councilmember Gordon, they are volunteers. They're absolutely, they do not generally become police officers, although some of them probably have, but they are certainly our volunteer base. They do get extensive training on, just dealing with people. There are certain things that they get, directing traffic. They do wear a uniform, but they have no weaponry whatsoever on their person. And so when I say their expansion really of the DID, it's in their practice of what they're doing. When I was downtown, we talked a lot about visibility equals livability. And when people see a uniform, they know who's on the good guys, that they're people they can go to. And the Downtown Improvement District ambassadors are incredibly visible. That those green, bright shirts, people see them and they feel safe. So when people see police reserves, they see another uniform. They see that as a safety mechanism. And so they will be able to communicate with police officers if necessary. But they'll be out, they can provide. And we want them to be proactive. We want them to talk to people. We want them to give them directions and just have communication. They are an extension of the Minneapolis Police Department.
Do we know how many reserves we'll have working?
I don't. There's a goal certainly each time, but because it's volunteer, it can change. It can vary.
Okay, thank you.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, just as you related, things change, so one of the things that has popped up lately is these gatherings of young people that have been quite problematic in a couple cases. And I understand that's continuing, and apparently it's across the country from what I've read in national publications even. So I assume Park Police is in our network of who we're working with, and how are we reacting to those situations?
Chair Yang and Councilmember Johnson. As a matter of fact, I just had a meeting yesterday with Chief Ohado. Although they're not participating in jet patrols this year, we do work closely with them, and we're trying to share communication. Our biggest challenge with these groups is, although we can monitor Facebook and some other social media outlets, they're using Snapchat, they're using Instagram, and things that we aren't necessarily on, and so it becomes problematic for us to pick. They can get a really large group together in a short period of time. So we're doing our best to, with our SROs and others, having our ears to the ground in the schools, really understanding what is going on out there. And I think that will be also a benefit, having Bike Cops for Kids full-time in our neighborhoods and our SROs out in the neighborhoods to be able to get some of that information that we have no mechanism of getting otherwise.
Councilmember Palmisano?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, thank you for being here. I wanted to also point out that a couple weeks ago, Councilmember Gordon chairs the Youth Coordinating Board, and he and I were briefed on some of the outreach efforts by the Youth Coordinating Board street outreach programs. And I know that also this summer, they're working very hard on making sure that for events that are going on downtown and in other places where there might be large gatherings, that they're also making sure there are kid-specific, teen-specific activities as part of those programs. And I'm sure you're coordinating with the county and with the other groups on that. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts to share about that method of deterrence or preventive maintenance in crowds for the summer. And I'm also curious, how many, as we continue to work toward the goal of 860 officers, how many sworn officers do you expect that we will have then come the summer months? Can you just share a little bit about our numbers and our recruitment efforts?
Chair Yang and Councilmember Palmisano. So the numbers that we have today will remain the same going into the summer. And I hate we lose somebody, it seems like every other day. So I venture to guess the exact number unless somebody knows. Not okay. I always feel good when the chief doesn't have the answer and I look at my people and they don't have it either. That makes me feel better. Yeah, my gut told me around 820. Okay. So a couple things. The YCB, I am aware that they will be out. They are coordinating with us. It was actually on my notes as one of the strategies. I didn't have anything more to add other than knowing that they were out there. I think it's a tremendous benefit. There's a lot of benefit to having peer-to-peer conversation, especially when young people are involved. They tend to listen quite a bit, frankly, to each other versus authority. And so that's a huge benefit for us to have those conversations, which is another reason why I have a Youth Chiefs Advisory Council. I have my Chiefs Advisory, which are community leaders across the city, but also providing a platform and a voice for our young people. And not just young as in under 18, but also 18 to 24. Building that new network of community leadership and in partnership with the police department. It's a huge benefit in recruitment. And we're meeting with, we just had a new recruitment video put out and we had, 600 and some hits on it already. And so that's been beneficial. We have our multicultural recruitment team out and about. I've connected with some folks in the last few days as well on how we can get some messaging out. Frankly, I met with Black Lives Matters earlier today and I said, I need your help. It is a challenge in this country to get people to want to be police officers for a multitude of reasons. It is an even greater challenge to try to find people of color who want to be police officers. Everything that you see in here is negative. And until we change the negative, we're not going to be able to diversify our organizations to the degree we should. And so I need their help on that. I need all of your help on that, frankly. So we need to be able to share the positive stories and the good work that the police officers do every day.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chief, I have a couple questions. When should we expect this press conference? Because I know my constituents are dying to hear about, the North Side strategy.
Chair Yang and other council members, the Jet Patrol start June 1st, so I know we had conversations about a May 29th press conference.
Okay. And the second question is, the mayor's office, my office, and other staff within the city, have been alerted to, maybe a spike in assaults that have been happening to the East African community, in the 4th precinct. And, that kind of speaks to the issue of, how can people, have input or give feedback to form this North Side strategy if we have one, just because, my sense from what you're saying is that, we're going to tailor these specific to the precincts and it could change, at any given time just so that it meets the needs of the community. And so let's say for our non-English speaking Somali constituents, how can they, help to give feedback so that we can accommodate them in terms of our public safety strategy?
Chair Yang and Council, I put that where we need to have that focus is within each precinct, and inspectors have, their community meetings and outreach in that form. That's a great point with different languages. So some of the literature we have or in those meetings would need to be certainly in a multitude of languages, so we can do that. As things progress, not just in the summer, but throughout the year, and we see that there's trends or issues, making sure that things get published and that those conversations do occur. So that's how we'll do that the best, certainly in North Minneapolis and other parts of our city.
So essentially, contact the inspector, maybe talk with the inspector, see what can be done with that. But I mean, alerting our, I guess, local precincts to just the issues so that it's on their radar so that they can maneuver and do better, right?
Correct. And then
Okay.
we should ensure we do utilize our CPS folks as well, because they have connections with neighborhoods and community members and can share that information. And many of them have their e-groups, so they can send out emails to people that would need to participate in meetings or give us feedback.
Okay. Council members, any other questions? Council member? All right. Well, thank you for that presentation.
You're welcome.
And I will move for us to receive this report. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. All right, Chief, you're going to do the intro for the Office of Justice Programs, and then DC Arneson and DC Rondo will do the rest, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
there we go. So why don't
Yes.
we have you do the
Great.
introduction then?
Great. So thank you for the opportunity. I think it would be very helpful to be able to come forward to this group on a frequent basis, just to be able to provide you updates. As you know, I asked the Office of Justice Programs to come in and take a look at our discipline processes. We are a progressive department and we want to make improvements. And they walked away with 5 recommendations. Some of the things we had been working on were already in progress that they were recommended, so that makes it a little bit easier. But the structure was put into place to have a steering committee led by Deputy Chief Arredondo and Deputy Chief Arneson, and would break out and create subcommittees underneath to have each category: communications, conduct oversight, community relations, our early intervention system, and coaching. And so on each of those committees, and some of you represent those committees, we have a vast gamut of participants, from members of our PCOC board, the Police Officers Federation, the Communities United Against Police Brutality, Black Lives Matters. We have invited, we don't have anybody listed on these yet, but I'm hopeful after this morning's meeting that they will participate. Obviously, yourselves, the mayor's office, all the rank and file from all the ranks are represented. Community advocates, faith leaders, the city attorney's office, out front, our mental health care workers. We have representation from all of our ethnic groups on these committees. And so they provide feedback, direction, and approval in shaping new policies and SOPs, and these recommendations come from me, obviously, for final approval. So I'm going to let Deputy Chief Arneson and Deputy Chief Arredondo speak a little bit more about that, but one thing I do want to touch on is the national initiative. I put recommended the Minneapolis Police Department to, there was 100+ other departments across the country that put their names in as well. We were one of the 6 cities selected. I'm very encouraged with that process, although it's been a little slow, frankly, in starting. They won't be here until June 16th and 17th to start some of their preliminary, but it is a 3-year contract, basically, with these 6 cities. We have an opportunity to really create a blueprint, I think, for the country in how law enforcement moves forward in building community relations. There are 3 priorities, which certainly are ours, is procedural justice and implicit bias, building public trust, and racial reconciliation. So those are 3 key areas where we will have technical support and assistance. And frankly, I think we can certainly lead the way because it builds on what we're doing with the OJP, and we're already working in those areas. But if they can provide us with technical assistance, some financial dollars to help support positions that we would normally not be able to have, and I don't mean that in sworn officers as much as I do in support, in research. There's Yale and Harvard and what's that? John Jay. So, I mean, we're going to have some good support to be able to come up with some good ideas and strategies to help create this blueprint for all law enforcement agencies across the country. So these things all do connect in. I would anticipate having something similar to the OJP structure. I don't want to have 2 separate functions. I'd like to see them intersect instead of having 15 subcommittees. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. I have to somewhat take the lead from the DOJ as far as what that could be, but I have certainly some ideas and thoughts, and my team, we've been discussing that, and then certainly we'll be reaching out to you folks as well to see what thoughts you might have on that and to best move us forward so that we're not duplicating efforts, and we certainly do a good job of the gap analysis. So for updates on committees, meetings, and their priorities, which we've asked all the subcommittees to come up with priorities because we need to stay focused on making our accomplishments. I'll ask the two deputy chiefs to come up and give you additional information. If you have any big picture, high level, anything from me before I go regarding either the national initiative or the OJP, I'm happy to answer that.
Anyone with any questions? Well, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Good afternoon, Council Chair, Council members. As the Chief mentioned, as the OJP was formed, they did their diagnostic assessment, and of that, they came back with 5 areas where they believe that the Minneapolis Police Department can strengthen themselves. So those 5 areas, as the Chief noted, are communications, conduct oversight, community relations, EIS, and coaching. So from that, we formed a steering committee, which Council Chair Yang participates in. We're also, Sarah?
DCR, no, could I just ask you really quickly to clarify EIS?
Yeah, clarification for EIS is Early Intervention System. Yes, and DC Arneson will go more into that as well. But so from that, we developed a steering committee. Also happy to see Mr. Ron Edwards here, who participates in that. We also have Ms. Nicole Arkbold from the Mayor's Office, who also participates on our subcommittees. So with that, I'll kind of just go through what the 5 subcommittees are tasked with doing and focused on, and then DC Arneson will talk about updates to date from each committee. So the Communications Subcommittee is put in place to develop a comprehensive communication strategy to increase the understanding of police conduct and oversight process, to enhance the overall messaging and image of the community, and to improve MPD's relationship with traditional media.
Good afternoon. So 3 of the things that the Communications Subcommittee are working on, one of them is they're discussing putting a video together that will help explain how compliments and complaints are filed with Internal Affairs, PCOC, the new PCOC. And so what is that process? They're discussing finding a strong, well-known community voice as a narrator. They're thinking of either Professor Jason Soul and also Councilmember Gordon, who would be my choice, just so you know.
Wow, the brown nosing here, wow.
I know. Interviewing MPD and PCOC officials to learn more about that process. We have a new website that's coming, and that will be launched, and will give the community a greater look inside of our police department, providing unfiltered access to the police. And they're discussing what the public would like to see on that website and what they'd like to have access to. And thirdly, they're putting together a social media team of officers who will give followers real-time information and updates directly from their squad cars. They're also expanding the administrative rights in social media to the precinct inspectors, and they can highlight the arrests, the crime alerts, awards to police and community, and outreach via that social media outlet. So they have looped in their committee members to understand how this might be helpful, and going over the pros and cons of learning what kinds of tweets and posts would be informative and interesting. And of course, as always along the way, if we find it's not working, we adjust.
Council Chair and also council members, the second OJP subcommittee is the Conduct Oversight Committee. And they are to adapt model policies to improve and increase public knowledge and trust, looking at comprehensive, accessible, and being fair and transparent. The process is open and accountable. It should include multiple languages, educate officers to provide relevant info when asked, and determine patterns of emerging problematic behavior that are department issues for training.
Thank you. Now, this subcommittee is not as far ahead as other subcommittees. It's a very technical subcommittee. So they have been meeting, they have met 3 times now, and they are going over the history and educating the members of the subcommittee about PCOC and the history of it and how it works and what surrounds that. But two of the things that are in progress and are being printed right now is upgrading the complaint forms in 6 languages. Those would be English, Spanish, Somali, Hmong, Vietnamese, and Oromo. And then a brochure coming out shortly on how the OPCR process works in all of those 6 languages. So some feedback from the steering committee has been to upgrade the and look at the comfort level of that public space in civil rights and internal affairs, where the community comes in and makes their complaint. So they're asking that there be signage in all different kinds of languages and that it be more inviting versus looking more stark and uninviting. So again, moving forward ahead on that.
Council Chair and council members, the next subcommittee is the Community Relations Subcommittee, and they are focused on building upon current efforts, supporting officers to engage, such as our bike patrols, youth interaction, building relationships and model practices. A high priority on training in diversity-centered leadership and cultural communication. Lessons learned from the Cedar Riverside Exploratory Study, and creating more police community collaborations in communities of color.
So just last night, 2 people returned, or actually 2 officers and 2 community members returned from a review of Sherman Gardens Community Project with the Las Vegas Sheriff's Department. That was a partnership between the community and the Sheriff's Department to improve public safety and public trust, my words, but through engagement. And through engagement, what they saw is their shootings come down and more public trust with the community. So there'll be recommendations coming forward on that. The second thing they're looking at is they want to call it Catch Kids Doing Right. And that they will highlight and give public recognition to youth from the community through community newspapers, social media, Star Tribune, etc. It'll be done, given by a police officer in an authentic and genuine way. The award will be displayed in a display case at City Hall. And they'll be partnering with organizations that have structured programs already in place to connect these youth with other programs that will have a positive impact on their life. One of them being with us anyway would be the Explorer program and PAL.
Following that is the subcommittee EIS. I'm sorry.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things, and I actually, I think gets missed, and I've spoken to Deputy Chief Arredondo about this, in this broad overview of community relations, is the relationship in communities that have high levels of crime for sort of the outreach to the average person that can be sitting in their house terrified, afraid to let their children go outside, all that sort of thing. And the only interaction, that they have with the police department is seeing, calling and seeing responses for troublesome activities in their neighborhoods. And I just really think that we have to think about this part of the community. And these are people who aren't going to show up at a public meeting. They're not going to be standing there screaming and hollering. They are traumatized. When I see the ShotSpotter maps every week, it just blows me away what the average person is subjected to in communities that have this high level of crazy gun activity. Waking up, you got to go to work the next morning and you're awakened at 3:00 in the morning because somebody's shooting a gun off and you're in your alley or speeding down your alley, doing these ridiculous behaviors that we see in these communities. And I really want us, when we talk about the community, those people are part of the community. As I said, they're not standing there screaming and hollering, but they are a part of the community. We need to help them and we need to figure out what we're doing to reach out to them. I sat at a community meeting at the Jordan neighborhood after we had that police officer shot in North Minneapolis. And one of the, or several of the people were talking about, just the lack of follow through after people had been taken out of their homes, put on buses, that kind of stuff. I mean, this does not happen to people as often as it does in some neighborhoods. And so what's the strategy for reaching out to those people who are, again, traumatized by this crazy criminal activity that's going on, and what are we doing for them?
Council Chair Yang, Council President Johnson. Yes, I know that is a very passionate subject for you. I can tell you that the chief also wants to try to capture that population that oftentimes does not get heard, but yet they're dealing with these incidents every day and every night. So you use the term trauma. So it just so happens to be that at the last Chief Citizens Advisory Council, Chief Harteau, with the recommendation from Mark Anderson from Barbara Schneider Foundation, brought in Dr. Donna Minter, who specializes in community trauma and, more importantly, community healing. And so one of the things that the chief is exploring from that is engaging officers in those precincts with those community members who aren't often heard, who aren't part of a larger group, to really make sure that we're connecting with them and making sure that we're hearing from them what they have to deal with, and how we are not making sure that we're not ignoring our services to them, because we need them. And too oftentimes historically in our community, we've not heard from them. And so the chief is certainly on page with that. It's on our radar. And we want to specifically look at this area of trauma and, more importantly, healing, and targeting that population that oftentimes gets lost in the fray. So the next subcommittee is the early intervention system, and that is focusing on bringing in a new prevention-oriented EIS, one which will improve officer performance, manage risk, a continuum of interventions. It'll be an automated system with identifying criteria for behaviors, a flagging system, and an automated data system.
So the early interventions subcommittee, of all the subcommittees, this subcommittee will probably continue on a little longer than the other ones because of the technical nature of what they're working on. We used to have an early intervention system in the department. We found it did not work as well as we wanted it to, so we're just revamping and starting from scratch. And they're actually making some really great progress. In fact, they do have a technical advisor, Ellen Scrivener, assigned to them. And one of the things, after she walked out of meeting with the EIS group, she says, quote, "I've never seen a group move so quickly and be so responsive to the community on this issue." So a couple things that they have worked on and they're very close to having decisions on is completing a list of possible factors to consider for inclusion into the early intervention system, such as the number of use of force by officers, number of complaints, and officers' use of sick time. Then they have completed a list of tools available when someone has been found to have reached that threshold of one of these factors that I've just listed. And so such as, maybe too much use of force could mean that something is going on in their family life, or an issue that we might not realize, maybe they need more training, whatever it would be. So those are kind of just two examples of that. As I mentioned, they anticipate having the program completely outlined by August, but actual implementation will take longer because this actually requires a new software program to collect information from a variety of sources. The software programs that we have do not talk to each other, so what we want is something that program that actually can reach out to other programs, pull in the information, and give us a report, flag someone if they have too many use of force complaints or whatever the issue may be.
DC Arneson, I was at that meeting with Ellen Scrivener, and one of the issues that came up with regards to the EIS was that we wanted an EIS or early intervention system, but we don't want it to be discipline, or there's a tension between the two, right? And can you kind of speak a little bit about that?
Correct. So it's going to be a little bit more all-encompassing. Obviously, too much use of sick time is really not a discipline issue, but too much use of force time after time after time could be. So it's a dual system in that this is why EIS and the coaching committee work hand in hand, because an officer might be flagged in EIS for an issue that would not be considered discipline, but it should be something maybe that the supervisor is aware of so they can mentor. If it's a use of force issue and it's found that, that it's inappropriate use of force or potentially inappropriate use of force leading down that road, then potentially it could go to the supervisor or potentially could be an internal affairs issue. So a little bit of gray zone in that right now.
Right.
Mhm.
And,
Working through it.
the EIS is much more for the improvement of officers, whereas discipline, suggests that something done was wrong and we want to fix it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And the last subcommittee is the coaching subcommittee. The coaching subcommittee is looking at strengthening coaching and integrating it with our new EIS. To develop documentation that includes both goals, expectations of supervisors, coaching process, and resources to employees, training them to become skilled coaches, and expanding those resources to employees to include training, education, oversight, and feedback.
Okay, as I just mentioned, the coaching subcommittee is working with EIS because hand in hand, they really do go together. But one of the things that they're very clear on is that they want to go away from the coaching name because coaching is associated with internal affairs, the internal affairs process, and go to another name such as performance mentoring, so it's not associated with that internal affairs. And that's a name that Ellen Scrivener, our technical advisor, came up with at the meeting last week when she was here. And they really hooked on that, and they like that a lot. So that is probably going to change here quickly. We think officers will have more buy-in when they know that the documentation is not being provided to internal affairs for minor policy or incident violations. They talk about changing our culture, as the chief does, that mentoring, mediation, and coaching is not a form of punishment, but an effective tool to change or correct behavior. And also, getting that word out to our cops that they are valuable as employees. To provide training for supervisors and patrol officers to deal with early warning signs that affect officers' work performance. And also start out in the academy teaching officers to look out for one another because that's your first line of defense, and that your partner actually sees if you're going down the wrong path. And so we want their police partner to reach out to them and say, look, this is not the way that we do it. You're going down the wrong path. Let's change that behavior. So again, Ellen Scrivener did go to this meeting also, and we walked out together, and she told me that she was totally impressed with the group, the open and honest conversation they had about race. And she said, this has been an incredible day. I didn't know what to expect, but my report back to OJP will be very positive. So I think that the subcommittees are making good progress, and they're talking about a lot of hard issues, but because of the nature and who's in all of these subgroups, they are doing a really good job moving forward with that and building relationships with each other, by the way.
Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you, and I appreciate the report and the information. I wanted to just stop a little bit on the early warning system or the early intervention system. And so saying that we need new software just raises some concerns for me, partly because I see that as it's going to add expenses, it's going to create more delay. And I just want to remind us all that the early warning system was something that the city council and the department was pretty clear we needed at least 10 years ago, and we were going to get it done soon. And then to find out we actually had never got an effective early warning system out there, I don't know. And then you hear about officers who get in major problems, and others say, oh, we could have kind of saw that coming, or, we should have figured that out earlier because there were these signs. August sounds great, but then I'm worried it won't really be August. And so I don't know what, you'd think if you were with the old school, you'd use some paper and you'd have the file and you'd figure out a way how to track some of these things and find out about it without needing expensive software. So I guess I'm wondering if we have a workaround planned, if we can't find the right architect to design our software. And I'm wondering if you have any idea how much it will cost to make this improvement? And is this something IT could just do for us? How worried should I be that this is going to create a significant delay? And
Right. Well, Councilmember Gordon, when we started the EIS years ago, we were the first in the nation. So we had nothing, no model policies to look at. And this EIS subcommittee is looking at model policies from other police departments that are our size. And so those departments also had the same concerns going forward. So those are some of the questions that they're asking those other police departments. Cost, what kind of a system did you use? How long does it take? And yes, you're right. Can we use a paper system? Potentially we could, but are we going to capture everything we want to capture? It's something that the committee will be looking at. So I can't tell you how much it's going to cost. I wish I could. I don't want to undersell it, but I'm sure it's going to be somewhat costly because IT costs always are. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to have a good system going forward so that we're not having this conversation 10 years down the road. So that the next administration can walk in and already have, a project or a EIS system that is helpful.
well, that would be good. I had another question because I wondered if one of the reasons why we had difficulty in the past was from some pushback, perhaps from the police union, the federation, or some officers who didn't really want, and they had concerns about how an early warning system might be used, or it might make it easier for us to build a case for getting rid of a officer who wasn't performing well or something. Are we figuring out how to work with or work around any resistance from the Federation or from rank and file to this? Or do you think that never really was a problem and I'm just making stuff up?
Well, Councilmember Gordon, it was new, and anytime anything is new, people become fearful of it. They don't know which direction it's going to go. But they're on the EIS committee and on the steering committee and on on the communication committee, we have Federation members. So they have input right at the ground level and how they wanted to see. They can bring up any concerns they have at that point and then sell it to their members. So I'm hoping that working on it on the front end will be helpful versus putting it in place and then having them worry about it after the fact. So we'll have their input right up front with that.
And Council Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon, if I could just add too, I think there's a perception that EIS alone fixes the problem. I think that has to be balanced with, so Chief Harteau is trying to change the culture and push more accountability down at the precinct level. So there's monthly check-ins that have to occur every month between a supervisor and the officers on their shifts. So EIS is important because for the first time, we're also including community members to say what should be some of those behavior performance criteria that we also want to see. That's what we see as a good police officer, or that we see as good performance or performance that's lacking. But it's still important to know that the accountability and the culture of the department, we have to have folks on the ground that are continuing to have those conversations with their partners, with the officers on the shifts, so that it both can complement each other. So if that makes sense. So EIS is important. It'll be a great tool, but it should not remove the mentoring, the supervision, and the accountability of those folks out at the precincts.
Well, and that's how I would imagine it too. In fact, if there is, if there are 3 flags that get raised about an officer, it should be that inspector or that officer supervisor who knows about the flags and all of a sudden says, oh, well now this officer is now entitled to some counseling, some resources. We're going to kind of come in and see if we can do some retraining because we acknowledge there's a need for some kind of intervention or whatever you want to call it. So that's why, I just imagine if you're a teacher or if you're a parent or you're working in a small business, you're observing the people, you're kind of understanding, maybe you're tracking a few things, and it isn't that you necessarily need a big system of software to say, oh, we've got 4 complaints about this person and they did these 2 things, or whatever we decide are those criteria. Let's do some interventions. So I appreciate that you said that. I appreciate it's probably going on automatically. Hopefully, the good managers and the supervisors are just intervening and they can know their work and they know their job and they're helping redirect and mentor officers all the time. And it probably is. And I know that it's not going to fix everything either. So, but it's one piece that might help us.
And if, part of the job of the coaching committee is to come up with a way on how supervisors can coach their officers. And supervisors are the ones out on the street who are going to see what's going on with the officer first. And could probably, to your point, could probably pick up before the machine will or a computer system will that there's an issue going on. And so we are going to teach them how to correctly mentor, coach, their subordinate so that they feel comfortable in that and they're doing it in the right way.
Some of the more disturbing stories that I've heard, and in other professions or jobs, there's official training, everybody gets their orientation, and then they get out there actually on the job with their first more experienced person they're working with, who then proceeds to tell them, that stuff didn't matter, that doesn't matter, here's how we really do it, kid. And that's something that I think we have to avoid too. That's like mentoring that backfires on us, but not. Hopefully that's not going on in too many cases.
You know, so let me ask this. I mean, ultimately, what's going to happen with any of these subcommittees, their recommendations that go to the steering committee, and how it goes to the chief? I mean, ultimately, what's going to happen? What should we expect?
Well, every month, the subcommittees come in front of the steering committee, which you are part of, and give us updates. And then they'll be coming through again on the backside with their final recommendations. The subcommittee makes recommendations down, so we actually help the subcommittees, form the SOP or the policy. Subcommittee will then present to the chief, who will take our recommendations into back and then give us I assume at some point, give a report out to the community on what she's accepted.
Okay, so ultimately, we can see some policy changes in the police department. Maybe we might see some ordinance changes also. I mean, it could be a number of options, right, that could be on the table. I mean, depending on what all these committees come up with. And, so, I mean, my thing is, I just want to explain to the general public that, I mean, the goal of this, and these are my terms, not your terms, but the goal of this is to have a kinder, gentler, more responsive, more accountable, a better police department, right? Because that's all of our goals, right? Yeah.
Exactly, and to be more engaging and know what the community needs and wants and what's the pulse of the police department.
Right. Okay. Any more to give or any parting words before?
No, thank you for letting us report to you.
Thank you.
It's an honor.
Thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say thank you. I participate on the Conduct and Oversight Subcommittee, but having this briefing of all 5 committees is really great. It's not easy to run 5 subcommittees in parallel, so thank you for all of your work.
Okay. All right. Well, I will move to receive this report. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we have one final discussion item, and this is a discussion item related to jail fees. And this is to authorize a contract with the County of Hennepin on behalf of Hennepin County Sheriff's Office for payment of fees for pretrial detention at the Hennepin County Public Safety facility, and authorizing any documents necessary to effectuate the agreement. Costs are based on actual per diem rates with an estimated contract amount of $3.7 million for a 2-year period beginning January 1st, 2015 and ending on December 31st, 2016. The agreement shall be automatically renewed for successive 2-year periods unless terminated under the terms of the agreement, and this will be referred to Ways and Means. And with that, we have Robin McPherson here from the police department to give us a report. And then we also have Assistant City Attorney Bert Osborne, who is here to help us out with that because he's been very involved in the contract negotiations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. After negotiating for many, many months, we have a tentative agreement with the Hennepin County regarding the jail fees paid by the Minneapolis Police Department. The new contract will result in an annual savings of approximately $250,000 per year from the current contractual levels. This is about $150,000 savings from budget. When we budgeted for the current year, we knew that we were going to get some savings, so the budget savings is $150,000. We feel this is an excellent step, first step in getting our contract kind of back to where it really needs to be. Just a little bit of background. The most recent contract and actually previous contracts were based really more on a flat rate than based on actual. And we believe the original intent of that contract was to pay for both regular and probable cause holds. But again, it was a flat rate. The savings mentioned with the new contract is due primarily to changes in the billing structure, which is going to an actual usage rate based on their per diem charge. The ongoing issue, which is something that we hope to address over the next few years, is that we continue to pay for all PC, or not all, but the majority of PC holds. And this is different than the other jurisdictions that are out there using the jail. The county, their justification for this difference in billing model between the jurisdictions is that the Minneapolis Police Department does not have an intake or any kind of intake area, and the other agencies do. We're not sold on this argument because the other jurisdictions are actually using the jail for their probable cause holds when they are over within their own areas. So we don't completely agree, and again, this is something that we're going to be working on over the next 2 years, but we feel that this is the first step. Currently, just for your information, approximately 50% of the probable cause holds within the Hennepin County Jail are due to Minneapolis Police Department. The rest are due to the other jurisdictions. On the positive side, again, we think this is a great first step because the contract does go back to the actual usage versus a flat rate, which is what is producing our savings. It allows us time to investigate whether we want to have a booking unit, whether that's cost effective for Minneapolis to have a booking unit like these other jurisdictions. And there's also in the new contract some built-in data requests that we've not had in the past. And this will allow us to more efficiently and effectively monitor what not only we're being charged for, but what other agencies are being charged for, and also some of our usage information. While this is not in the contract, one of the things that has been of issue over the past few years is actually a performance issue with how long some of our intake is taking during the booking process. And of course, when this happens, there's a significant amount of overtime that is usually 2 officers involved. So what they have agreed to do with this contract is to actually sit down with us and try to come up with additional performance issues and ways, procedures maybe that we can cut back on some of that time for intake. That would potentially create an improvement on our overtime. Both Chief Arto and Bert Osborne have approved the proposed contract. Of course, it's pending council approval. But again, we think this is just really a first step in a multi-year process. So any questions?
Mr. Osborne, do you want to add anything to this before I call on Councilmember Gordon?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the one positive, the biggest positive I see from this is that since we're going to be paying for what we actually use going forward, it really incentivizes the police department. I've already had a couple brief conversations with a few of the deputy chiefs about, let's think about now who needs to be booked and who doesn't need to be booked. And I think that's an important consideration for any police department. And now there'll be a direct incentive to think more about that. And that's the only thing I have to add to the conversation.
Okay. Councilmember Gordon?
So I hope I didn't miss this, but you said we pay a certain rate per person per day?
Yes, that's correct.
What's the rate that we pay?
It's just over $128 per day. And that's actually approved by the commissioner, and there's kind of a formula on how they come up with that $128.
Can it go up during the 2 years?
No, it actually can be raised annually. It's something that's actually voted on and approved within the county. So the previous amount was 122 something. That was around for a couple of years. So we're hoping that this 128 will stay for the next 2 years.
And is that the same rate that our peer
Yes,
cities pay?
yes, it is.
Okay, so are we paying the fair amount? Are we paying extra compared to the cities, other cities in Hennepin
The
County?
difference that we're paying versus the other jurisdictions is in the probable cause holds. Those are people that ultimately are let go without any kind of charging. And I'm sorry, I'm finding a
And
cold.
that's the 72-hour hold that we can
Some is
hold?
72, it's 36, 48. There's multiple actually levels within probable cause holds. I probably know more about that than I ever want to know. But there's like 5 or 6 types of probable cause holds. But the difference is between what we're doing and what the other jurisdictions is we are paying for those probable cause holds. The other jurisdictions are not.
They're not, so the other jurisdictions will bring a prisoner in and have the county hold them?
Yes.
And
They have-
get it for free?
Yes, that is correct. And that's the bone of, that's the concern here.
How did they get that good deal? And so we're paying $128 per day for a 24-hour hold or whatever, and they're paying $0?
That's correct. And the reasoning or the justification that the county has given, and again, this is not something that we totally agree with, is that the other jurisdictions do have booking units. We do not have a booking unit. So the other jurisdictions are taking the onus on themselves for holding what prisoners they can, and then when they have too many, then the detained person would then be transferred over to the Hennepin County Jail.
Does Hennepin County do some kind of booking service for us? I mean, do they do anything special?
No.
Okay.
No, I understand what you're saying is no. It's the same when we come in, they're getting the same, everybody's getting the same service when somebody is brought to the jail.
Okay. And so
If I could, I'm sorry, that's what led to this performance discussion, where we actually would like to ultimately put a performance factor within the contract because we feel that we're paying for it, basically, is what it amounts to. So that if somebody is working or somebody is taking longer, that we would get preferential treatment because we're up there paying extra that other jurisdictions can't. The county didn't feel that they could effectively control that, nor could there wasn't a real good way to support how to come up with this performance indicator. And so that's why they're willing to sit down with us and discuss how we can improve the procedures of the county at the jail. And we actually feel that's a very positive step because we haven't had that relationship in the past.
well, I appreciate that we're making forward progress. It sounds like we are, and that we're discussing these things with the county. It still seems unfair that we're having to pay for this extra. So I guess I can understand the idea of, well, could we get some extra services since we're paying for more or some performance out of it? I'm a little bit concerned about the automatic renewal nature of it. So I know with some of these contracts, it's nice when we have sort of a deal reopener. And I wasn't clear from the staff report if we are going to, if we can renegotiate some of those terms before that renewal, or if it's either we do it or we don't do it after 2 years, and how that's going to happen.
This contract, while it has an automatic renewal, as I believe it's the June 1st date that we can raise our hand and say we want to reopen this for the next term period of time, which I think they're fully aware that we plan on doing for the next time because these issues are not completely resolved. There is no dollar amount in the budget or in the contract for the next 2 years, so we would have to come back before council, correct me if I'm wrong, but because there's no dollars in there, we would have to come back for, in front of the council and in front of this group as far as the amendment is concerned.
And so I think it said an estimated, was it 3.7 million?
For 2 years, correct.
For 2 years, and there's the potential, if we don't have the need to arrest so many people, that will go down.
Yeah, I actually think 3.7 is on the high side, but again, this is kind of like I won't say it's not to exceed because it's based on actual, but of course, when we put it in the contract language, we put it at kind of the top level. But I would anticipate it would be less than that.
And we're not guaranteeing any kind of minimum payment to them, so they're
No.
not, it seemed like we used to sometimes guarantee just a large amount
Yeah.
for the service without this per diem, and that
Yeah,
seemed to
well,
really seem unfair.
yes, I'm sorry, in the past, I mean, this flat rate was basically a guarantee.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Chair, beyond, and Mr. Chair, members of the committee, beyond the flat rate, which we paid regardless of usage in the past contract, there was an automatic 3% per year increase, which, when you're getting up to $1.8 million, 3% of that's a large number. And so that's not in the contract anymore either. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rob.
that's correct.
Well, this is a significant amount of money, and for those of us who've been on the council for a while, Council President and I at least know we've had these discussions in the past, and I think this is, it's much better what we have now, but it seems like we still have a ways to go before it feels like we're getting the best deal we can and we're being treated fairly.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilmember, I very much agree that this is a work in process dealing with the county, but we also feel that it is a step in the right direction, and that we knew that we weren't going to hit it on the first time, just between budgets and timing and things like that. So we feel actually, I think I don't want to necessarily speak for Bert, but I think we feel very good with what has happened over this negotiating time and feel that we and the county has a much better understanding of our concerns and where we want to be in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Council members, any other questions? All right, Ms. McPherson, I have one last question. Councilmember Gordon was kind of slowly going to this, but didn't get to this point. And I'm wondering, so if we did have a booking unit, what would be the savings? And the other way to ask it is, what's the cost for our PC holds compared to anybody else?
Mr. Chair, council members, the PC holds account for about a third of our fees so it's a significant amount. So let's just, for round numbers, say that amount is about $600,000 a year. I, at this point, cannot tell you how much an intake or a booking unit would cost.
Right, we're not going to ask that question.
Okay, but that
thank you,
is
though.
absolutely something that we are looking at because of the cost. But again, one of the things we need to look at is, would this be a 24-hour facility? Would it, only be certain days of the week? So there's a lot of variables and a lot of, I think, questions. We do have some questions out to some of the various jurisdictions to get more information, and we'll obviously be speaking with them quite a bit in determining what the cost would be.
Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. Council members, I'm going to move that we approve item number 6. Any questions, discussion on the item? None? All right, well, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And with that, we've concluded our business, so we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
I suppose it could be affordable.